a good platoon sergeant will relentlessly bully the
Yes.
the platoon leader relentlessly. Hey guys, we're Seven and Nomad with the Hard Time Strong Men podcast, cheering up a bear class of man, and today we are continuing our series, The Ranger Handbook Abridged, Part 2, Chapter 1, Leadership. That's found in TC 3-21.76, and we're going to take a little deep dive into the Army's core leadership model, different roles within that leadership model, that unit of the platoon, and how we can apply that to the layman. So, to start off, leadership is the process of influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission. So, Nomad, you weren't in the Army. You were in the Canadian Army, but you've obviously heard of the Ranger Handbook. You've, as a leader, I'm sure have read all kinds of books and tried to equip yourself the best for your role. So, our armories differ vastly. But as a leader, a lot of the stuff transfers over, and unfortunately, by trial and error, we found out what works and what doesn't. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. So going through this Ranger Handbook, we're trying to apply it one-to-one so people don't actually have to read this, because this thing is absolutely horrible to try and read. But this chapter specifically is almost entirely filled with, just Army jargon, Army speak. So it's kind of difficult to make it easier to read without sound like we're reading, verbatim from the book. So we're going to be branching off a little away from that, but try to give off the foundational, concept of this. So.
Yeah, and there's definitely things I think from this that can be applied to normal people. It's just like you said, people get lost in the weeds, and because looking at it right now with you, it's literally just a military field manual, so it's obviously all the jargon that they army it up. But a lot of the specifics in this are not applicable outside of an actual platoon with a huge rear echelon supporting you. So, but I think the leadership chapter, like, most definitely can help a lot of people if you take it in the right 100%. Context.
I feel like if you're able to glean off the fruits of this, then it can be very applicable to wherever you are, whatever you're doing. So to kick off, so principles of leadership. So a leader gives purpose, direction, and motivation, and the leadership model, or the leadership requirements model, establishes what leaders need to be, know, and do. That's something we were drilled in from day one about leaders: be, know, do, in everything. So attributes be, so your leader needs to have character, they need to lead, they have a presence, they have intellect, they develop, and they achieve, so they get results. So I'll never forget when I first got to my first actual unit in the Army, because I don't know how it is in Canadian basic, but when we were going through basic, we had essentially the cream of the crop for our drill instructors. So we had all staff sergeants, all guys who were just super motivated, PT studs. They knew every FM, they knew every soldiering task, front backwards. They could teach you everything, and they were just on you all the time. And their mentality was, we're going to make you the absolute best, because that's we have a very limited time to do it, and here we go. And so when I got to my first unit, and I had this fat E5 tell me that we could, well, if you guys want to take a smoke break, we can go ahead and do that, and just be back in an hour. It was just culture shock to see the huge divide between what I thought a leader was supposed to be, and then seeing the reality of what quote unquote leader actually is in the Army.
Yes, culture shock or not, I feel like you still got the better culture shock, because you were exposed right away to a high standard, and that is the difference. I talked about this with Nocturne Kinetics before, and how in other militaries, not just Canada, but other militaries don't have drill instructors. Like, it's not a position, so you're getting taught by any clown at whatever rank. in Canada. So I wasn't taught by the cream of the crop. I wasn't taught by like the most elite, the most physically fit. And usually, and I figured this out when I got to my actual unit later, units would post out the worst people to the school. So you're getting the worst people. You're getting guys that the unit doesn't deem operationally fit. So they'll shove them into school.
That's so frustrating.
So there's huge problems with that, obviously, because you're teaching people who, at the core level of a recruit, in any job, not even the military, if you did this for any other profession, when you're trying to set a precedence or a strong foundation for skills or for, instilling like ethos and the right culture, you're getting the wrong people right away because you're sending like your clowns to this place because the operational side doesn't want them.
Setting up your new people for failure.
So for me, it was kind of reversed, like what you said, where you were like, you saw the cream of the crop, you saw these PT studs, like the Army was set like very high, and then you get to your unit and you're like, wow, these guys are clowns. I got to my unit, man, and it was like fear because they were so much more intimidating than like my basic.
Yeah, it's definitely culture shock for sure.
Yeah, it's just the other way, but I don't know which way is better. Like I've thought about it a lot over the years, and I'm like, man, if I would have known what it was or the lack of leadership in these like basic organizations at the lowest level when you're a recruit, I'm like, I don't think I would have joined if I would have known like, the quality. Because again, it's just, and not to get so deep in the huge differences, but I do like, again, following the US model, you guys have basics specific to branch and not only branch within some MOS IDs. So if you're going to be an infantryman, you go to an infantry basic. In Canada, because we're so much smaller, I did basic with Army, Air Force, and Navy, and I had instructors from all three branches, and I was on an infantry contract. No. It doesn't work. The model does not work. And their argument is, well, we're all trained to the same standard. I'm like, yeah, but it's a really low standard. And then when you get to your actual operational unit, the unit is filled with studs. Well, it was during the GWAT when people actually cared. These guys are like, everything you learned, just dump. I'm like, but I've been taught things a certain way for 6 months, so now you're telling me it's wrong? So it was wasting my time.
And, think about all the guys that lost motivation because of that. Like, that's crazy.
I knew a lot of guys that got out after that, man. Like, literally got to our unit, and they released after like 2 years. 2 or 3 years, depending on their contract. Because basic was just a waste of time.
Like, training everybody to the same standard. So if you're supposed to be an infantryman and you're getting trained to the same standard as a desk clerk, like that doesn't track.
Yeah, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And I was very fortunate. So again, depending on how big your courses are, like your basic or whatever, they broke us into, I'll just use all American terminology so it doesn't confuse people. So whatever, you're in your platoons, you're in your squads, right? You have like your squad leader for your courses. I was very fortunate because my squad leader was a combat engineer. Other squad leaders were like one of them literally was an Air Force clerk. How is he teaching a basic
branch?
From a different trade completely, man. This guy didn't even know anything. But again, on basic training, the argument is, well, you're going to learn everything you need to know at your unit. I'm like, why am I doing basic then? It's literally a complete waste of time.
I'm sorry. I'm just drawing a blank. I can't even I don't know how to process that. No, there is no pro to it. But again, the culture shock for me before I got to my unit and saw the reality of what basic training was, again, we call them different terms. My section commander, who was a combat engineer, he wasn't even there permanently at the school. And how they do it in Canada is you're posted to these schools for like whatever the rotation is, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. That's all you do. You just teach basic training. This guy was only there as like an attachment. He wasn't there permanently. It was just he was doing one basic and then he left. So he was still in the mentality of what an actual operational unit was. So he ran our section way more tight. Like he PT'd us more. He showed us the reality of what you would like be exposed to at your units. Like not even like war, it's basic. But he just talked to us in a more professional manner versus everyone else was like a robot because they were just reading a field manual. That's good at least.
From a school.
Yeah.
But again, I was fortunate because he was my section commander. But a lot of other people in the platoon on my basic were, getting taught whatever by their Air Force person or Navy. There was a couple Navy guys too teaching, which is like a joke because you could be a musician in the Canadian Forces, and you're teaching future infantry guys.
Wow. So the Army's leadership style, or leadership model, be no do. So be, your character, you have values, you're physically fit, you're a leader, you lead others. know, so you know your job, you know everybody else's job. You can pick up, we say 2 up, 1 down, right? So you can pick up 2 leadership positions above you, and you're training, your replacement, right? So you're leading, directly, the guys directly under you. You lead by example for, adjacent people who are in your unit. And then situationally, if you have to, pick up extra responsibilities, you can do that too. And then do so you are your outcomes, right? So first and foremost, you're completing your mission. You're leading, excellently. You're giving excellent leadership to your Joes, and you're making fitter, better, harder to kill units, structures. So do the Canadian Forces have anything similar to that model when you were in it?
Yeah, they had something called the Principles of Leadership. Honestly, I don't. I could look it up while we're talking, but I don't remember it because, like I said, everything on their Principles of Leadership model was like a big joke because a lot of people didn't actually display competence or like actually live by these ethos. It was just a laundry list of things.
But you said that you came up with your own, right, in the pre-show?
Oh yeah, it was like not a good leadership model though. I wrote a very sarcastic one on what the leadership actually like conveyed, and I gave it to all the troops, and they thought it was like hilarious. They ended up like printing it at work and posted it around battalion because they thought it was like so funny because it was an accurate representation. But yeah, so one of the examples that they followed was or one of the lists on their ethos is like it changes over the years. There was like 7 principles. I think 11 was the one I got shown on my first leadership course, but it's like know yourself and seek self-improvement, be technically and tactically proficient, develop a sense of responsibility among subordinates, make sound and timely decisions, set an example, know your people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a laundry list of crap that they read that they're supposed to follow as an ethos model. But like we said, furthermore, Canadian military is just it's a very small military, but they encompass all of us in one like identity, which is weird. Like they don't do branch specific stuff. So like the leadership, the principles of leadership is not an army model, if that makes sense. It's like for the entire Air Force,
the entire armed forces,
etc. But the entire armed forces claims they follow this model. But like I said, if you actually were in the military for longer than an hour and got to a unit, you'd look at all the people who don't exemplify any of this, and you're like, why? Like, how are they a leader? They don't even follow the leadership
it's like
model.
When the army always pushes, our unit lethality, and it's like, you're a bunch of cooks. Like, the hell are you talking about lethality for?
Yeah,
it's just the big organizations. I
even remember too, man, being on like really, really big, well, again, big in context because it's Canada, but like a brigade exercise. So like a brigade commander comes out, this general, and talks to everyone, and everyone's there, and there's probably like a couple hundred infantry because it's Canada and we're the minority. And he says like, oh, you guys are warriors on this exercise. And you look around to your left and right, and like literally people have been in a like a fake fob in the field for 6 weeks and haven't left their tent. I'm like, I don't see any warriors here, dude. Like, there's very few and far in between. So I don't know who you're talking to. It's very like confusing, and it's lost. And like the reality of it, well, like I said, when you've been in a unit, whether it's 3 years or over a decade, like me, I'm like, you see it's not what they claim it is very quickly.
Well, it's like, so me and Six were on a exercise. I don't remember. I don't know if this was at NTC or just at our home unit, but we were at KP duty. So we were on like kitchen duty because we had, quote unquote, died, right? So we were getting respawned with everything, but we were helping the cooks do their job because apparently they couldn't do their jobs themselves. And we got attacked, and they all panicked and they couldn't do anything. And, I think it was Six picked up one of their rifles, and it was a completely stripped M4, nothing on it. And it was just rusted. And, he pulled the charging gun back. It's like all the past generations screaming. It was like, what in the world? How can you be? And that's why I never understood about all these, oddball MOSs, all these oddball jobs. It's like, how can you be in the army? I don't understand why this isn't just contracted out. Like, shouldn't the army's job be to, just fight wars instead of all this other extra stuff? It's wild.
Yeah, and I will say this though, again, looking from the outside in, at least with you guys, again, I know it's different now, but when I dealt with the U.S. forces when I was in, your branches were wearing different uniforms, which makes sense. Like I support that and like respect that. But in Canada, we all wore the same. Some units wore different ones depending on like where you were within a specialty. I'll just leave it at that. But the normal, like big green military, Army, Air Force, Navy, we all wore the same uniform. So yeah, we all wore the same one. The only differentiation between branches was the name tape on your uniform. If you're in the Air Force, it's got blue writing. If you're in the Navy, it was black. If you're in the Army, it's green. And then your rank was the same thing. It was black or blue or green, but they all wore CAD bat. They all wore the same thing. And from far, for anyone looking at the digital pattern, like I can't see like specifics on the green for the Army person, like the rank, because it's all the same, right?
Like,
when you're
what rank is that guy?
And you're looking at people's ranks. I'm like, what rank is that guy? What unit is he? Like, I don't know. We all look the same. And the other differentiation thing is like the berets, right? Because we didn't. Canada doesn't wear like. What did you guys call it?
We call them PCs, not patrol the cover, caps.
No, patrol caps. So that's the one that looks like a baseball hat, right? So we don't have anything like that. We literally wore a beret all the time. It's not just for your dress uniform. Like we wore it in garrison with your like combat uniform. So other than the beret color, like everyone looks the same. It's just one big Canadian Forces, and I'm like, there's no differentiation between branches really. Yes, there is for some jobs, but like you all look the same. You know what I mean? The ranks are very similar. Yes, there's specifics like artillery has different terms, armored has different terms, Navy has like POs, you know, Air Force has whatever. But in the big scheme, I'm like, as a new person looking in or trying to fit into this culture, everyone looks kind of the same, but it's not even a sense of, oh, we're all the same team, we're one big happy family. I'm like, there's a very big difference between my job and that cook, like you said. So I don't understand why we're all treated the same, or they think we're.
Well, when there's no differentiation, there can be no pride. You know, I mean, there's nothing to say you're. You know, there's nothing to say 100%, you know, like 100%. A PT stud, you know, guy who, you know, is, you know, super active and engaged in his job versus, you know, some desk clerk or a water purification specialist who's there for, you know, welfare essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like, and it's not a way to say it's like, you know, elitist or like you're better than people, but the reality is in life throughout human history, there's been winners and losers, and there's leaders and followers. And I wasn't a loser, and I was in a leadership position. And even when I was a new guy, I was like a leader among the privates. You know what I mean? I just wasn't cool with following orders and being a loser. So I think like that's something that's lost for a lot of people when they leave the military, and even within where the big militaries are going now with everything going on. I think reminding people that, yeah, these leadership models are not just a bunch of like words on a laundry list. Like there's something that you should live by.
And you know, they used to mean something, and they can mean something again. You know?
Yeah. I think people just need a friendly reminder on what these things could mean. And I really like, though, when you started this, the verbiage you guys use in, again, the Ranger Handbook, you're using the term leader. Like it's not manager, right? Like you're using the word leader, an army leader, right? And even like the beginning, you said inspires, influences. It's not like dictates,
motivates, or, you know,
commands. It's like you guys use certain words, motivates. Yeah, like these are powerful words. So when you're new joining this massive organization, you're more likely to follow someone who's leading you or influencing you than someone who's commanding and dictating.
So I can think of two examples. One guy, team leader I had, worst team leader I ever had in the Army. Hated his guts. Would have probably practiced that if I could. But this dude was always screaming, always getting in your face, always smoking you, you know, whatever. Anything he could do to keep a hold of that little, you know, bit of control that he had, right? And then on the other hand, the best squad leader, best leader in the Army I ever knew, I'd never heard him yell except to be louder than a gun ever. You know, if he was like commanding fires, then, you know, of course he'd yell so you could hear him. But if he was disciplining you or telling you what to do, he'd never, you know, his voice would never rise over a conversational tone, because he commanded presence. You know, I mean, he had that commanding presence. He motivated his dudes, and you know, he embodied everything that a leader was in the Army. So you wanted to follow him. You wanted to do good by him. And I feel like that's just you know, the shining example for me as far as what a, a leader in the army is.
Yeah, like 100% is that he's influencing actions from his people because he's like displaying competence. Right. You know what I mean? So he doesn't have to yell. He doesn't have to raise his voice because his guys are going to want to work for him because they know they don't want to let him down, or like they know that he's expecting things of him without him like
exactly. And he would never ask you to do something that he wouldn't do himself. Habitually, always he was.
That's a big one.
Yeah,
that's a really big one.
And he was always the first to wake up, last to go to sleep. He'd always eat last. I mean, just all these little leadership traits that, like you said, are seemingly being lost, but, it is so impactful for, for subordinates to see that and to watch that being lived out. It's, it's incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just really like the words that you guys use again. So like you said, team leader, and we were talking about it kind of in the pre-show. We didn't use that word in our military. It was section commander. I'm like, yeah, but commanding is implying he's in a power of authority over you. You guys called them platoon leader. We were platoon commander.
Yeah.
It's just like the words alone
puts them
are
up
like
on a pedestal.
very like. It puts them up on a pedestal, man, and guys hate it.
I mean, immediately.
You know what I mean? Or guys are fearful of you.
Well, and it completely negates any possibility of like interpersonal, like relationship with those guys. It's like, oh, I'm not going to talk to that guy. He's the commander.
Yeah.
Like he's separated.
He's the commander. Yeah. Yeah. And then even like you said, in relation to the best leader you've had, you said he's not making you do something he wouldn't do. And I knew so many section commanders in the army that couldn't even do what they asked of you. And they wouldn't help you with it. They'd be like, oh, I'm the section commander.
Wild.
And they'd like leave. But then whenever I was in a leadership position, I never called myself a section commander. I never did. I always used the word leader, and my platoon commander hated it. He's always like, we're not American. You're the section commander. That's your rank. I'm like, no, I'm just a bro who's in charge of these dudes because I've been here longer. And I have more experience. Like, obviously I do. I've been here longer. I've been a professional soldier for over a decade by this point. These kids are 18. Like, I recognize that. But I'm not going to get them to do something that I can't do better. I'm just doing it because I'm in that position where I have to get them to do stuff. And like I called all my guys by their first name. I knew where they were from. You know what I mean? It was very different.
Yeah, the
relationship I had with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you didn't perform in my, again, section, is what we called them. I've only ever 2 people in the whole time I was in like the higher position of section commander. Only 2 guys in my whole career did I remove. And I told the platoon commander, I'm like, you're moving him to another section. I'm like, I do not want him. But everyone else in my section did not want to leave.
Well, because, and you slipped it in there, but you never asked your guys to do anything that you couldn't do better. And, that, you're holding yourself to a higher standard, and that constantly challenging yourself to be better and to raise that bar, I guarantee is a huge factor in why they wanted to stay.
Yeah. And like, not to get too sidetracked on like the Canadian model, but again, for you guys in the States, and I know we talked about this. So again, we're referencing the Ranger Handbook, so it's valid to talk about. If you're not in the Ranger Regiment, but you do Ranger School, you get a Ranger tab. It's earned. You get to wear it, right? And that's like a thing of pride. People want to wear that tab, right? Once they get it, like they wear it no matter what unit they're in. People look at them and they're like, that guy is a leader. He's Ranger qualified. He's super switched on. He's probably physically fit. He probably knows patrolling in and out, et cetera, et cetera. Canada doesn't do any of that with any courses. There's no cool guy courses where you get a tab. You can't wear anything on your uniform. They make us all the same because they want us. They don't want elitist attitude, any of that stuff. So I made tabs for guys in my section. Nice. And I made them all wear it. I separated them from the platoon and I called them by the section call sign and I called the other 2 sections losers. And then my section knew that they were better. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to make them better. I'm going to make them tabs and they're going to wear it. And then it stuck to the point that our company commander on one of the workup trainings for Poland, like that we went to eventually, he used to call my section by the call sign that I made for them. And he was like so high up in the chain of command in the company, but he knew that was my section's name because they had tabs. I made them wear it. And I told them, I don't care who tells you to take it off. You tell that NCO or officer, come find me. And I will tell them, you're never going to take it off. Yeah. So, and again, like having that separation, it's not an elitist attitude at all. I'm like, it's totally healthy and normal to want dudes to be better than you were when you were coming through. And like you said, building that sense of community and like building rapport with them, right? Because they knew that like they could talk to me. But like you said, if something ever happened, I didn't have to yell at them. I could give them disappointed dad speech, and these guys didn't want to let me down. That was more effective than me like threatening them with my rank.
Because you built that rapport with them. It makes me think. So a couple things, what you said about, hey, if anybody tells you to take that off, you have them come find me. You know what I mean? So you're taking responsibility for that. Whereas anybody else, I saw it all the time where, you could set a Joe on a task, have him go do something, and he'd get sidetracked by someone telling him to do something else. Or, you go,
man,
and it's like,
I hate that.
So no, like something I learned from my team leader, and something that I passed off to my dudes was, if I tell you to do something, go do it. I don't care what rank they are. If they tell you to do something else, come find me, because I need to get that done. And if someone's going to get smoked for you telling somebody no, it's going to be me, because that's on me, because I told you to do it. Right.
Exactly.
And then another thing about, making you guys stand apart. I think I told you this, months ago when we first started working together, but I was part of our weapons squad, right, before I left. And the way that my squad leader set up his weapons squad, so his his machine gun squad, was you had to go through the entire, so normal fire team, normal rifle squad, all the way up to team leader, and then he would select a team leader out of the teams in our platoon who he wanted to come onto his squad. So it's like you graduated.
So he was pretty much cherry picking the best people.
Cherry pick guys that were squared away. Mm-hmm. And then you knew, like everyone in the platoon knew that if you were on that squad, like you were squared away, like you were the cream of the crop. And,
you were handpicked.
And naturally, leadership didn't mess with our squad because we knew what we were doing and we got stuff done. And so, if they're doing something, like, we're not going to mess with that. And, our squad leader built that rapport with the chain, with leadership, like, hey, I got stuff to do. I'm making these guys better. Let's do our thing. And it freaking happened. Like it's wild what happens when, leaders actually take responsibility and raise the standard. It's like doors open, man. It's like magic.
I even remember too, man, if, towards the end of my career, right, as I was like, they knew I was like leaving the military, but if they, in the platoon level or company, even company, usually if they're like, we need people to do this, like a work party for whatever the day, I would grab my section and I'd hide them. And then if it was on the platoon level and they'd be like, I need people to do this, I'd go into the platoon commander's office and say, my guys aren't doing that. I'm doing training with them. You can get 1 and 2.
I love it.
They're doing nothing. Or if something actually had to get done and they're like, we need all these people from the company, I would volunteer my section to do it, but I'd go with them and I would take over. Whatever company NCO was like required or like delegating the task, I would walk up to them, and usually it was like same rank as me. And I'd say, hey, I'm here with my guys. What do you need done? Tell me what has to happen and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it with them.
Yeah, so I know it's being done. Like it's being done well.
Exactly. And it's not that I don't trust them and they need to supervision, because that's the difference. I'm there literally with my shirt off with them working. Like they could be, moving ammo, filling sandbags, whatever. I'm like, I'm literally there with them doing it.
Yeah, lean by examples. Well, it's like that graphic you showed me, a boss versus a leader.
Yeah, right? The boss is standing on the pedestal being dragged by the slaves, and the leader's in the front leading.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, this is just... it's something that's written in the Ranger Handbook, and clearly anyone can buy this and read it, but is it actually like actioned upon, at the lowest level in the platoon? And like we said in the pre-show, that like it's a lost craft, it's a lost art, it's a lost, and not even an art. I'd say it's a way of life, like being embodying the virtues of a true leader. It's just people don't really care anymore, or people don't know. They don't know what it actually means to lead.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is like, it's not just leading in the army. It's not just leading in the workplace.
It's leading in life.
Yeah, leading in life, leading in the home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you do as a father? You're first to wake up in the morning, you're last to go to bed. You make sure your family's fed before you eat. I mean, it's a way, like you said, it's a way of life. Being a leader, like that's, it is what it is. And because we've lost so much of that in men in our time. I firmly believe that's why we're, paying for it right now.
It's sad to say this as an example, but it's like this a lot of people can relate to. I definitely learned more from worse leaders than I did from really good ones. Because they'd exemplify how not to be.
Pain is a very good teacher.
Yeah. Or like hate when you're really new at the bottom and you see that person at whatever rank. I'm like, when I become that rank, I'm not going to be like him.
Yeah.
Or once I get rank, I'm going to like fight him now. I'm going to like hold it personal and I'll remember him.
Oh yeah. I've got I've got a handful of guys where, like you said, growing up in the Army, it's like, all right, well, whatever he's doing, I'm not doing that.
Exactly.
Because that's not it.
Yeah. And it's the same thing out of the Army, just like what you said with, leading life as, as like a father or a husband or whatever your situation is. A lot of people, good people who want to be better, they try and be better than their parents were.
Right.
Like, it's no different from the Army. You're just being normal about it.
Yeah. And, there's no conflict there, because you should want your children to live better than you did. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like as a leader in the military, I wanted my guys to have a better like go at things than I did as like a new guy.
Yeah. I mean, and I wanted my dudes to be better than I was.
Yeah.
Always.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely think it's something that's lost, but yeah, I think the verbiage is a key though, like for
yes,
the U.S. military as a whole, regardless if people exemplify these characteristics or not. The terminology is still there for a reason, and I think people need a constant reminder of that. Like we said, platoon leader, squad leader, like it's that word leader is emphasized, not commander, not manager.
Yeah, well, it's that subliminal, it's that messaging, it's the seed that's being planted, right? So whether or not you see the fruits of that, it's constantly working in the back of your head. It changes your your way of thinking. But going back to like you said, to platoon leaders. So a platoon leader is responsible for what the patrol does or fails to do. So the platoon leader, that's typically a O1, O2 lieutenant, right? So an officer, and he is in charge of his platoon. Platoon being made up of 3 teams. Typically 4 guys, and then your 2 squad leaders. But he is responsible for positioning different teams. His one of his main jobs is keeping headquarters, so higher leadership, informed through different reports, keeping a time schedule through backwards planning, which we've talked about before, and supervising and issuing follow-on orders. So keeping the platoon, his unit moving, keeping them abreast of the situation, and then keeping everybody on the same page. What was your equivalent?
So it'd just be platoon commander. It's just the terminology again, but and it's same rank or similar rank. We have like LT so even a captain can do that, because we don't have captains as company commanders. That's the rank of major. It's
Interesting.
Just
okay.
Different.
Yeah.
But I like, though, I know we talked about it in the pre-show kind of, and I'm like going to contradict myself, because I know I said that in a platoon context, because we're referencing the Ranger Handbook, everyone should be called a leader. Like, you shouldn't be calling yourself a manager if you are, like, there's an issue. It's very different. But I think a platoon leader, though, they're kind of like junior management, because yes, they're in charge. Yes, they're leading your guys, but their objective is still directly supporting management's.
Right.
For the most part. And they're not, and I don't care what anybody says, most platoon leaders / commanders are not thinking about the lowest dude in their thing. They're thinking about their mission is supporting the person above them.
Numbers.
Yeah, numbers. Yeah. So they're like a junior manager, I would say, in a normal context for people not in the military.
I'd almost say a lower manager.
Yeah.
At least in our context,
yeah.
Because then for us, the the company commander would be, I'd say, mid tier, and then higher on headquarters and everything else, up and up and up, right?
Yeah, but this guy would be like lower management for sure because
Right.
and like I'm sure you guys have had this too, and like everybody who's worn a uniform has. You get that new platoon commander / leader who wants to like talk to the dudes to try and be cool with him, but like they're kind of weird, and like the guys don't know what to say to him because they're still like, yeah, totally, sir. Like, you know what I mean? Like it again, like in the context, not in the uniform. That'd be, I don't know, like if you worked in a warehouse or something and the dude from upstairs who wears a different shirt comes to the floor to try and, you know, check up on the guys, but he doesn't really know what your job is, right? And like everybody
Right.
knows he doesn't know what your job is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I'd say he's like a
that's
manager.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to always be the case, as you know, as long as we have, you know, officer and non-commissioned officers, right? The whole officer branch is always going to be disconnected because from the get-go, you could be, you know, you could have an hour in the Army, you would outrank everybody that is under you. Doesn't matter what their experience level, doesn't matter anything. You're in charge of them, and what you say goes.
Which again, in like, because this could be a whole other podcast we should do talking about how it should be ran in the and like the breakdown. But
I'd love to do that. That'd be fun.
I have said day one, officers should not be direct entry. They should be taken from the NCO Corps.
100%.
And you should be like, as a platoon leader, you should be like 35 years old, not 21. Yeah, it should be like you've branched off to the management side now, but you have like 12 years in at the lowest level.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's what is so
work
frustrating. Is we already have green to gold. We already have a way in place. It's just we're not utilizing it.
Yeah, our military has that too. It's called CFR, Commission from Ranks, but usually it's really older NCOs do it, and they're doing it for the pension because they're never in a platoon commander position for like longer than 6 months. They're doing it just so they can get a check in the box and then go to some Gucci staff job in a unit, hide out, and then they retire. And I'm like, why did they commission then? They didn't benefit the Army as a whole. They're doing it for a pension.
It's crazy.
But again, like there's so many ways like I could explain how to run it better. But yeah, so in this context, like you said, he's responsible for what the patrol does or fails to do. They're overall commander of, well, again, commander / leader of your smallest team.
Yeah, of
the platoon.
Yeah, of day-to-day life, right? So, like I said, he's in charge of your timetable. He's in charge of, you know, keeping, you know, his leadership, you know, your overall headquarters element, you know, aware of what's going on. And then, you know, he supervises, makes sure that things get done within the platoon. And, you know, if he has to, you know, make fragos or fragmentary orders, if he has to make follow-on orders for you, he'll do that as well.
Did you guys have, in your normal day-to-day life in the lines, did they have their own offices? Like they weren't with the platoon?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So ours were like that too, but right before I got out, we had a new platoon commander come in, and I bullied him really hard. And I told him that he's useless in the company office with all the other platoon commander losers. And I said, you need to be here where the platoon needs you. And then his argument was, well, what if the company commander needs me? And I laughed and said, we have a phone. I'm like, you can call him. And he literally hid in our platoon office. And we were very efficient as a platoon, but I bullied him very hard to get him in that office.
Yes. As it should be.
Yeah. But again, I was the only dude in the company doing that. But I was, you know, on the way out, and I was trying to set a precedence that I'm going to care until the day I leave. But
right.
Yeah, I was just curious if you guys had that separation as well. So like you said, it's an even bigger gap if they're not even with the guys. That makes no sense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the nature of the beast, right? But I totally agree that needs to be, you know, that needs to be abolished. That, you know, transitioning from, you know, non-commissioned officer, you know, from your listed dudes, you know, who have, you know, time, years under their belt, you know, to where you actually know your job and you can actually lead with confidence, and from, you know, a position of, you know, actual authority, knowing that this dude's done the same thing that you have and he knows what's up. Like that needs to be the standard.
It's just crazy because I'll use McDonald's as an example. Okay, full disclosure, I've never worked at McDonald's, but I've eaten fast food before. So if you work at McDonald's, I'm assuming you don't get hired like day one. Maybe again, you might like hire management. Sure. Like maybe you managed, I don't know, a very successful business and now you're managing this entire McDonald's as a whole. But I don't picture them hiring someone off the street to be your frontline cook supervisor with no experience from the McDonald's. Like they would promote within, do you know what I mean? As you like progress.
Right. Yeah.
So it's so odd that the military's like, well, this guy's got a degree. He's in charge now of 34 souls. Like that's insane. It's insane. It doesn't work.
But That's how the Army runs it for some reason.
Exactly, and that's what I mean is this separation of like the men versus the officers. It will always be that way. Like you, me, and Six are not going to change the big Army's policy. It's just there's things that they're doing that are probably not the best practice, and there's things that taking from this Ranger Handbook that can be changed to fit most people's application rather than referencing it verbatim.
Right. Well, and like you said, it's that application that means everything here. It's the whole reason why we're doing this.
Yeah. So under him in the book, I can do this one. So it's the platoon sergeant, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the platoon sergeant, the senior non-commissioned officer or NCO in the patrol, and second in succession of command. The platoon sergeant helps and advises the platoon leader, leads the patrol in the leader's absence, supervises patrol's administration, logistics, and maintenance, and prepares issues paragraph of 4 of the op order, and then just more mission and orders verbatim. But essentially, he's the most senior enlisted guy, and he can take over the platoon if the platoon commander died, in layman's terms. He's the number 2. He's the second in command. And I like, too, how it says advises and helps. So this is a thing where I had platoon, we called them warrants, just again, different rank, but platoon warrant, platoon sergeant, same thing, where they would influence and lead the platoon commander in the direction it needed to go because the platoon commander was weak and didn't know. And he wouldn't say, this platoon warrant I had specifically never said, hey, sir, you're like an idiot. That's wrong, blah, blah, blah. He would just say, hey, sir, have you thought of this? Like he would influence him with words,
tactfully.
like a really tactfully. And then we would essentially do what the platoon warrant wanted to do because he didn't trust the platoon commander. And then he always used to tell me, because I used to like watch him, the way he speak to him. And I was an E2 or E3 equivalent, whatever it is for you guys by this point. And I'd always look at him. And the platoon weren't like me because I was like motivated and I was keen. And he'd always be like, hey, watch this. And he knew I was watching what he was doing to the commander. And then he would tell me that he's doing it to get what the platoon needs, because the reality is in 10 months when this guy leaves, the platoon warrant will still be there. I will still be there. So like he's manipulating it so it benefits us right now.
100%. Yeah. A good platoon sergeant will relentlessly bully the the platoon leader relentlessly, because that's what needs to happen, because you have to think big Army for those who aren't in it. You'll be at your platoon, doesn't matter what rank you are, you'll have some fresh 01, fresh out of West Point, has a total of 2 hours in the Army, and he's now in charge of your life. Now, do you want that guy off free to do whatever he wants, whatever he learned in school? Or do you want your platoon sergeant to say, hey, sir, our guys kind of need water. Can you make that happen? You need someone who actually, knows what they're doing. So
I almost think it should be reversed. And I talked about this a lot before when I was in the military. I think the platoon sergeant equivalent, let's say that rank, I think he should be the platoon leader, and I think the officer coming in should be the second in command, because he can watch him from a position.
Yeah, it'd make a lot more sense.
I think it should be flipped. Yeah.
Well, and think about the nature of a platoon leader versus a platoon sergeant, right? So platoon leader, he's in charge of your timetable. He's in charge of, keeping headquarters informed, issuing, follow-on orders, everything. Your platoon sergeant, he's in charge of your resupply. So, water, food, ammunition, casualty report, setting up a casualty point, if and when you take casualties, right? And then adhering to the platoon leader's schedule. So wouldn't it make so much more sense to have a guy who's actually the platoon sergeant who's actually making everything happen? Yes. And then to have the platoon leader be in the secondary role, say, hey, I need this to happen, and having the platoon sergeant, I don't know, do his job. Shouldn't that happen just inherently off the back?
The other way flipping it too is that, so if you even change the terminology, so if the platoon sergeant was in a position, you just called it platoon leader, and then the officer coming in was called platoon officer, and that's just the term they used. The squad leaders would get things done because the platoon leader used to be the sergeant they worked for. He'd have rapport with them and things would get done.
100%. Well, and he knows how things
work in the platoon because he was there. And then the platoon officer is literally an administrative position, and everyone would know it.
Yeah.
You're literally here to give beans, bullets, water, accessories to the guys. That's it. That's all you're here for.
Right. Well, so you're supplying your dudes and you're supervising. So you're
Yes.
supervising your squad leaders, making sure that your security, support, everything gets done because you've done it before. You've been a team leader, you've been a squad leader, you've risen to this point, so what needs to happen in the platoon, and you are trusting your squad leaders, right? But you are, checking in and make sure that things are getting done. So why not have a guy who actually knows what's going on, in that position?
I don't know, and I've thought about this a lot when I was a private. Whenever we'd be doing stupid stuff at work, I'm like, why is it not flipped? Like, this would make so much more sense.
Right.
If the platoon warrant was in charge and the platoon officer was just the officer, he was just the admin dude.
Because that's the role he's fulfilling. I mean, stick him with your RTO, with your radio dude, have him follow around the platoon sergeant and get things done, keep everybody up to speed. But we have to.
He's
because
not making any decisions
right.
that'll kill people.
Right. Or if he is in a position where he can make decisions, then have your platoon sergeant there as a sounding board. Like tell me this doesn't make sense. But
how long generally or typically, again, we'll use, because we're referencing the Ranger Handbook, so I know it's the most senior dude, how long are they usually in the Army for by this point to be platoon sergeant? How much time in?
Oh man, these guys are typically E7s.
Because they're an E7, right?
Yeah,
E7.
So you're talking about at least
20 years?
At least less than that. Probably I'd say 10? 10. Yeah, probably 10 years.
Okay.
3 contracts.
So again, your model is the progression is the good thing, because in Canada it's you're a 20-year warrant at this point. Goodness.
Yeah, so I only did 4 years, but if they didn't know I was getting out, I could have made team leader, or I could have made I was already team leader. I could have made E5.
E5, okay.
By the end of my first enlistment.
Yeah, so again, the progression is just very different, and again, we're just referencing this model here, but okay, so platoon sergeant, at least 10 years in.
I'd say around that time, yeah.
This week's episode is brought to you by FieldSeats.com. FieldSeats.com is an e-commerce, federally licensed firearms dealer. They provide virtual reviews on brand new firearms, and at the end of the review, they give away the firearm being reviewed to a lucky attendee. Each item reviewed is given away for free as part of their promotion for purchasing what they call a field review. Currently, they've got field reviews up ranging from $20 for a brand new Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 2.0 to $65 for a new Galil Ace Gen 2. Each review is limited to around 38 people, so your chance of winning the giveaway are so much higher. Use code STRONGMEN to receive 10% off your entire purchase at fieldseats.com. Be sure to check out their Instagram and Twitter at FieldSeats if you want to go ahead and give them a follow and see what future items they have coming down the pipe. Thanks for your attention, and let's get on with this week's episode.
So, one rung down, you have your squad leader.
Yep.
So, squad leader is responsible for what the squad does or fails to do. He's the
job.
Yep. He is a tactical leader who leads by example. In addition to completing casualty fear cards, so whenever you have a casualty, setting up their status, everything else to your platoon sergeant. He will direct the maintenance of the squad's weapons and equipment. He inspects everybody's equipment, clothing, weapons. He keeps his leadership, so the platoon leader, platoon sergeant informed, and he submits his reports to the platoon sergeant. So, laser reports, spot reports, basically just keeping him up to speed on the status of his squad. So, how this looks like in a platoon. So, squad leader, he's in charge of 2 to 3 teams. So, your alpha and bravo teams, and then if you're attached to a gun team, he's in charge of them as well.
So, I'm just listening to this and reading it. So how many years in does this guy have?
So this guy's
6?
Yeah, so this guy's an E6. So he's got 5 to 6 years in.
Okay. And then, so he's the tactical leader who leads by example. Yeah, so again, it's like, I know we're referencing this. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. It's different though, because we didn't have really this position. So I guess by rank, I was that position, but my job wasn't that definition at all. I didn't report to the platoon sergeant. That was my second in command's job.
Okay.
I reported to the platoon commander.
Interesting.
Yeah. Again, it's just a different context. And now that like we're actually reading it together and like going through the book, I'm like, oh, it's not even close to what I did. I was that rank, but not the role.
Right.
Yeah, because even like you said, inspects weapons, clothing, and equipment. That was my second in command's job. I didn't do that. I was literally in charge of completing missions and objectives, and I would like come up with orders for my guys, and I would command and control them at the fighting level.
Yeah. So on paper,
I didn't do any of the admin. Yeah.
right. So on paper, it's worded like this, but in practice, so squad leader, he leans on his team leaders. So team leaders will be, checking guys' weapons, equipment, clothing, make sure they have food, ammunition, everything. They send all that information up to the squad leader, who disseminates that to leadership. So
Okay.
it's kind of like a stopgap, but then we're kind of bringing off from the from the flow of this. But team leader, right, in charge of his three dudes, they are he is their dad their entire lives, right? He makes sure everything runs smoothly, leads his team. The squad leader leads the team leaders, so he trusts his team leaders to direct their team, get everybody online, do everything that they need to do. But then he's in charge of movement, directing fires, that sort of thing.
So I'd almost argue then that the team leader is not dad. He's like big brother. The dad is squad leader because the big brother is just commanding the little kids.
Yeah, no, that's a good metaphor as well, for sure.
Yeah, and because the squad leader is actually in charge, the team leader's not. He's just doing what the squad leader tells him to do.
Essentially, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
he has a lot
like
more
a
autonomy.
brother.
He has a lot more autonomy than that. But yeah. I agree with you. In plain Jane words, yes.
In plain Jane words, right? And again, like looking at it just verbatim from the Ranger Handbook perspective as we're reading it, the team leader, they're closer to the actual dudes than the squad leader. Like there's that gap.
100%.
There's that separation. So that's why I would say he's like the big brother.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
In like layman's terms, and the squad leader's the dad or the mom or whatever analogy you want to use for your family. Yeah. So yeah, I guess the squad leader, like you said, is just overall he's in charge of the bigger picture of the squad.
Right. Make sure the squad gets work done.
Yeah. And then again, for normal perspective outside of a military context, I would just say that's like your supervisor at whatever the smallest unit level your job has you broken down into. So anything from like I don't know, normal jobs. All I know is uniform stuff. I'm trying to think of any normal job. I don't know if you're like a mechanic or something. You probably have a supervisor that supervises X amount of mechanics, but he reports to someone above him, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and then so so there's the weapons squad leader, like we said, just following along.
Sorry, I just thought of a metaphor. So like I'm a nurse, right?
Sure.
So
yeah,
I do everything with my patients. I have a nurse team leader I have a team leader, right, who is a registered nurse, bigger scope than I do. They direct me, to do whatever, right? Yep. So they lead me, tell me what to do. Above them would be our
is it charge nurse or is that even higher?
Our nurse manager. So charge nurse, okay. Right? Okay, so nurse manager, she directs the RNs, the team leads. If things aren't running smoothly, she ropes people back in. Gives you your left and rights, your scope, and like you said, just kind of like a middle management position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes total sense, and that's what I mean. Just again, the Ranger Handbook has it broken down nicely, where you actually have more leadership positions than other jobs or other fields. Because again, I know for the LE side, like we didn't have actual squad leaders we had supervisors, but again, it's different. Like they weren't in charge of 10 of you. They were just the most senior guy. You know what I mean? Because like we never operated in a group of 10. Like you operate at the individual level. That guy's just who you report to first.
Right.
So it's hard to normalize some of these leadership positions from the Ranger Handbook to other jobs or day-to-day life, because again, it's a lot of jobs don't have this much detail in the breakdown in terms of leadership positions.
Yeah, it is really hard to give a one-to-one example, but I feel like the core, the concepts can be
Mhm.
very, very applicable.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I was saying, I think like the big brother to, like dad or mom or whatever. And
Right. Yeah.
I know for us, again, not to dive into the breakdown too much because we're following the Ranger Handbook, but it was explained to me when I was very young that the person in charge of like the section would be the dad. The second in command is the mom. So it would be essentially here like your, let's say the team leader or whatever. And then the dudes are like the brothers or the, like the kids or whatever.
Right.
So the mom is directing everything that affects the dad's mission, but the dad is not, the disciplinary. Let's say it's the mom who's in charge of, inspecting equipment, inspecting your weapon, inspecting clothing, making sure you have food, making sure they have water, because the dad, the squad leader, is focused on a bigger picture.
Right. The day-to-day versus big picture stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Weapon Squad leader, the Weasel, he is responsible for what Weapon Squad does or fails to do. He has the same duties and responsibilities as the squad leader. So same exact job, just a different force under him.
And he's the most senior squad leader in the platoon, like technically on paper.
I don't know technically on paper. I don't think so, because a lot of the time, your gun teams will be attached to Alpha and Bravo team.
Oh, okay. Because for us, the weapons, we called it weapons debt. There was the most senior commander.
Okay. And honestly, so I don't know on paper, but that's how our platoon ran it. So
Yeah.
like our weapon squad, our weapon squad leader, he would pick from the cream of the crop of the team leaders that were active in his platoon. So he got guys that were switched on. He interviewed them. If you liked them, you were on the gun team, but you started at the lowest level, which was the gunner, and then you had to graduate to the the assistant gunner. So the team leader in that in that structure. So he had a lot of really switch on dudes, and he had a lot of leeway with that.
Yeah, and that makes total sense doing it that way versus just being like, okay, you're in charge now, but you don't get to handpick your guys. No, doing that way makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and it makes sense to have them be the most senior, because that element provides movement for your platoon. So,
yeah, and that's how it was for us too. And that's why I was asking. It was the most senior master corporal within the platoon. Again, he'd be like an E5, but he was the most senior E5 of all of the other three, because the caveat was once he got promoted to E6, he'd be in a different position.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see that. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and then team leader, we kind of went over it, but again, so the team leader just controls the movement of the fire team and the rate and placement of fire. The team leader leads from the front and uses proper commands and signals. The team leader maintains accountability of the Rangers' weapons, equipment, and ensures Rangers maintain unit standards in all areas and knowledgeable of their tasks of the operation. So yeah, I would definitely say he's the example that you want the guys to be.
Right, 100%.
Yeah. He's the pinnacle of what the soldiers should want to be, is the team leader.
Right, and it goes back to just the very basic principles of leadership, right? So you eat last, you're the first to wake up, last to go to sleep. He is you exude the standard. You're physically fit. You know all your stuff. You're big brother.
Yeah, exactly. I remember too. You and I talked about this before, but we can bring it up again. Like, so you said eat last, eat first, whatever, or versus eating first. I had a team leader, or again, the context is different because we had different breakdowns, but he would always eat first and take the first shift and then sleep like all night.
What a loser!
Screw us over. Yeah, he did it all the time.
What a loser, man.
And I remember when I got to that rank, I would take, I wouldn't even pick rations. Like if we were being supported by like company quartermaster and like we didn't have rations in our rucks, like let's say the company was feeding us or something, I would tell the guys in my section and be like, just grab me whatever rations left. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, just you guys pick. You guys pick whatever you want. I'll eat whatever's left. And I would always take the first watch, the middle one, and the last. I would take the first so I could do orders while they were sleeping. And then I would take the worst one in the middle. And then I would ask to be woken up first so I could get food ready for them when they were sleeping.
Yeah, I did something similar. So I would always, obviously always eat last after your guys. And then I always, whatever the 4 o'clock shift was, I'd always take that because that's always when dudes start to dip.
Yeah.
Be able to do all my, checks on everybody. And then I would ask to be woken up, with the first or with the last watch, just so I can, like you said, do all the stuff you need to do as a leader before, the rest of you dudes wake up.
Yeah. So, and that's exactly like I did the exact same thing. It's just I would include the first watch because, you know how it is. Anytime you're doing anything, once people are actually get time to go to ground and they're, in a patrol base or whatever you're doing, guys aren't falling asleep right away anyway. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll take the first one, and then you guys can kind of do your own personal hygiene whenever we discussed patrol base routine, or / camp routine,
right?
Like those things, I would be up like right away. I'm like, you guys can take care of your stuff, and I'll cover.
Yeah, 100%. Do your maintenance, do your hygiene, all the stuff.
Yeah. And then I guess we'll just talk about it kind of like what we said. So obviously following the Ranger Handbook, there's certain positions that they're essentially just attached to your patrol.
Right.
These people are outside assets, or should be outside assets. They should not be people that are infantry dudes doubling as this position.
They should be specialized.
They should be specialized. #, radio operator shouldn't be an infantry guy.
Goodness.
Should be a radio dude because it's an actual MOS ID. These people went to school to be radio operators. That's their job. So yeah, you got the medic, the radio operator, and the forward observer. And obviously the medic, in layman's terms, he's just there to assist with all the aid for the platoon. Anything medical wise, it's his show.
Yeah.
Regardless of rank, regardless of, the platoon leader being in charge, the medic's in charge of all the healthcare stuff.
Right. So in practice, he works with the platoon sergeant to set up a casualty care point or casualty collection point. He will supervise like the A to layer teams. If there's I forget what it's called, but in the platoon, in the squad, there are guys that are trained up on more medical stuff. So they're
so we just called them TCCC guys, and we had a couple in every section.
Yeah, essentially the same thing. Yeah. So yeah. He was in charge of them because he was the guy that was actually training them up in that skill set, right? So he was in charge of them. He was in charge of health and hygiene, of his platoon. So, checking your feet, if you got a rash, if you have a minor injury, taking care of all of that. He takes care of treating casualties, doing triage, everything in the CASEVAC site. And then he personally checks his dudes, so he'll, every night he'll go check everybody's feet, make sure no one's, growing anything. He's the dude with Motrin, tells you to take a knee, drink water, all that good stuff. Yeah. And he's in charge of requesting Class 8, so medical supplies, combat lifesavers. That's what they were called.
Okay.
And then he ensures that all the casualty feeder cards, all of the cards that have all of the casualty information, so method of injury sustained, everything on them is accurate when he sends them out to higher care.
And then what rank usually or typically would you guys get as a medic attached to your platoon?
Oh goodness, they were pretty low because you would have like your
you'd have your platoon medic and then company medic and then so higher up. Okay.
Yeah. So you have your platoon medic and he'd be like E4. Your company medic, he'd be like an E5 or an E6.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. And then like we said, this guy should be an attachment.
Right. Should be for sure. Mm-hmm. And he should be, working, so everywhere that he's not attached, he needs to be making those combat lifesavers, those TC3 guys. So that he doesn't have to do as much. If you can trust 2 guys, per squad to have be able to provide a higher level of care, that's absolutely invaluable. It's just more hands.
Yeah, for sure. And again, this is big army picture of having only one medic in a platoon.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then like you said, the radio operator, so responsible for establishing and maintaining communication with higher headquarters and within the patrol. Then he's got a whole list of tasks, but essentially he's in charge of, or he should be in charge of all the radios, all the frequencies, all the crypto. He's going to go through radio nerd. He goes through everything for the squad leader. He goes through everything for the platoon leadership. Like he makes sure everyone has their radios and he makes sure everything's squared away. And again, this is why, like we said, this guy should be an outside specialty asset. It shouldn't be an infantry guy doubling down in that position.
100%, because that needs to be his job. He only needs to focus on maintaining that radio and maintain communication, because you have to think, during a big operation, he could have 2 or 3 guys in his ear, and he has to sift through all that noise and, give you good information, because he's sending up reports. The whole deal. So
I've only seen it done a handful of times in certain units where we actually had a radio operator, I guess is the term for the Ranger Handbook, but other units, it was just some infantry nerd doubling down, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's pretty typical.
But it's not like realistic. And also, again, for the platoon context here, I've only seen it one time, where the platoon commander actually carried his own radio and talked himself. So it was actually him. And the radio operator, he used literally as his security element, and he was like the medic.
Whoa, I've never seen that.
But this platoon leader or platoon commander, I could jump back and forth between the terms. He used to be a non-commissioned member. He was like a corporal. And he commissioned. And this guy like had experience, had like multiple deployments.
I was gonna say that makes sense.
Course. This guy was totally squared away, and he told the radio infantry weenie, he straight up said like, dude, you're gonna be my security element, and anytime the medic needs you're gonna go with him and keep him alive. I can talk on my own radio.
That's tight.
and he carried his own like a gangster. He carried 2 radios.
What a monster. Yeah,
he carried 2 117 Foxtrots, and he had 2 headsets on.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's like the example of how it should be, but like we said, the radio operator is usually some infantry weenie that probably, got just tasked to like, you're in charge of this now.
Yeah, probably doesn't even know how to use half the radio.
Yeah, or like we joked before with 6th, like every time you go on any exercise, some dude ends up zeroizing all the crypto because he's forgot or like doesn't know.
Right.
Radio operator, again, very specific to your patrol context, but it's your radio dude. He's just in charge of radio stuff. He's a specialty guy attached.
Right. And same thing.
Do you want to talk about the forward observer? Yeah, because we didn't have that in a normal platoon.
Yeah,
they were like company.
I've literally worked with a forward observer one time, but same sort of thing. They're attached. The FO works for the platoon leader, serves as the eyes and ears of field artillery and mortars. So his job, he's got a radio. He's attached at the hip to the platoon leader, and he can call for fire. So he calls for fire for artillery and mortars. He maintains communications with the fire support officer, so his FSO, his leader in that chain, and he maintains his 8 grid, so exact coordinates at all times. Obviously because of the nature of his job, but he's just another asset for the platoon. He calls for fire. He sticks with the platoon leader. That's it.
And are those guys artillery by trade, or what are they? Are they infantry?
No, not infantry by trade. They're their own MOS.
Oh, okay. So it's totally different MOS just to be a forward observer.
Right.
That's cool.
So that's the thing. So
platoon.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So he's schooled up on METTC. He's schooled up on being able to provide situation maps, overlays. He can do terrain sketches. So his whole job is the terrain and the location of all of your assets.
And sorry, that's just artillery and mortars. That's not fast air or anything. Like no air assets, right?
No, to the best of my knowledge, that is just artillery and mortars. I feel like the field support officer, so the FSO, the higher up would do that.
Okay. Yeah, no, and that's cool that it's like an attached dude at the platoon level. Like that makes total sense. Your platoon has more capability because, like I said, I've only seen that position once, and it was at the company level.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have it in the platoon.
Crazy. I mean, well, how many bodies do you have, right? So
yeah, we had 24.
Yeah.
We had way less people.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we had way less guys. But again, in the perfect world, I think including these positions would make sense.
Right.
Yeah, and then so your I guess your assumption of command or your chain of command. So following this format, as people, let's say theoretically, get killed off, it's what? Platoon leader, platoon sergeant.
Right.
And then would it be the most senior squad leader? Yep. And then just working your way down.
And you work your way down.
The loneliest private at the bottom.
The lowliest private. And that's the whole thing, with Rangers, right? So the last R, Rarely will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight onto the Ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor.
Yeah.
So, this is drilled into the Rangers that, I don't care if you're the lowliest private, you need to be ready to, fill up that leadership position and complete the mission. The mission always comes first. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. No, it makes sense that it's definitely indoctrinated into that regiment and that culture. But like we said, the Ranger Handbook just seems to be the end all be all for any conventional unit, regardless if you're in the Ranger Regiment or not. And people just quote it like gospel, but they don't even actually understand it, or they don't do things properly.
They don't live it out. They don't
understand the context. Yeah,
they don't live it out. I mean, and that's the thing. That's why I talked about on this, on the first episode of this series is, people look to the Rangers as the standard because they are. These dudes are the cream of the crop. They are what every infantryman wants to be, or should want to be,
yeah,
right?
Should want to be, yeah.
But you're not living out these most basic, things.
No,
but
yeah.
But following the Ranger Handbook, just so assumption of command, like you said, top down as far as the meat grinder tells you to go. But then your basic tasks are just to keep everybody informed on the situation. So your unit headquarters, you're checking all of your security, your weapon systems, your equipment, stats on all your dudes. You have to give off fragmentary orders if you need to, reorganize if you need to, and you're just completing the mission, holding the standard. So your noise and light discipline, you continue movement, everything. So basically just, you take your brief halt, get your feet under you, and, continue on.
So again, looking at this from the outside, this will be a dumb question, but I'm sure there's people who are wondering it. In an ideal world, outside of the Ranger Regiment, in a conventional infantry regiment, should the like squad leaders, team leaders, and platoon leaders, are you trying to get them all like Ranger qualified? Is that like the goal, that these guys are in these positions who are actually qualified in Ranger school from like the leadership standpoint?
That is not just because of the the sheer resources that would have to go into that. And if you're in a unit that's like constantly deploying, that's not really a feasible thing.
It's not realistic. Okay, but
right.
Ideally that's what you'd want though, right?
Yeah,
These guys that
I would say, like you said,
okay.
Whenever we're able to do an episode on, how we think, an army should be run.
Be broken down.
Yeah. I feel like, these guys should be the standard. Imagine if every single unit was a Ranger regiment. I mean, that's a huge deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I'm just asking because again, for like Canada or the UK or Australia or New Zealand or any other major player like Germany, France, whatever, like we don't have an equivalent to Ranger. There's like some stuff that's similar, but I know for the conventional side here, again, like in a light infantry model, because I was never mechanized at any point. We had like your basic recce course, and you would go to recce platoon. You would do essentially like very close to a Ranger task, like when you're there. But as guys got promoted out of the platoon, you could essentially return to a generic rifle company. And I know the best guys were guys that were recce qualified, and you'd want to stack them as like leaders. Or if you're like a private and you're new, and your section commander doesn't have recce, but then you see a section commander that does have recce, the guy who has recce is usually more squared away.
Oh, 100%.
It'd be like the guy that has Ranger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, we don't wear tabs. Like there's no differentiation on the uniform, but like you can tell by like the way they give orders or the way they operate in a field environment. Like, oh, that guy probably has recce.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's similar in that context. It's just we use a different terminology, but and then it all relates back to, the platoon context and being a fighting unit, being the platoon for either reconnaissance patrols or fighting patrols or whatever the instance is. But yeah, I was just curious if you guys are actually Ranger qualified, like at the team leader level or above.
Not that I've seen. No, because
I know in the Ranger Regiment it is though. Like that's a requirement. You won't be in a team leader position unless you like pass the course, and if you don't do it like twice, they kick you out of the unit.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, they push immediately. If you're in regiment, you're going.
Yeah, you're going.
And if you don't,
it's like
you're
everyone
out.
Does it. Yeah, you're out. Which again makes total sense.
Yeah, and after a while, I talked to a Ranger a while ago, but it's like if you're not qualified after such and such time, like you get bullied
They
into
kick
it.
you out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
where they kick you out.
they'll
right?
bully the hell out of you until you do. If you fail, you're out. Like,
Which
yeah,
again
they don't
is
play.
honestly it's how it should be. It's
Oh,
maintaining a high
100%.
standard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, and
maintaining a high
they
standard.
guard that standard jealously.
Yeah, but totally. Yeah, and again for us it's different because like I've only heard of it once in my whole time in because Recce Platoon at one point had a max exodus of people releasing from the military, so they literally had nobody.
Wow.
So what they did was they ran an OJT program, like on the job training for guys, and you got to go there for a year. And then they eventually ran a recce course, and if you were successful, you stayed, and if you didn't, they punted you. But when I did basic recce as like a private, I wasn't in recce platoon. I was in a normal rifle company, and I had to like do a selection. I had to do an interview. I had to do PT test, all that stuff. But once you passed recce, if you were good, you got invited to the platoon. So like there was a separation.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That makes
that's why I
sense.
was wondering if Ranger was kind of similar in the context of a normal infantry battalion. Like if you're Ranger qualified, are you seen as like a higher caliber of soldier?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
All right, man. Well, that was chapter 1 of the Ranger Handbook titled Leadership. This was our Ranger Handbook Abridged with the Hard Time Strongmen with 7 and Nomad. Thanks for listening. Stay in the fight.